Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Parliament of Geeks, where we ask and answer one simple question. Be it weeb, or be it scrub. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and today I have two good brothers. We have our flamboyant flyer and living Wikipedia, good brother Flutter.
Yo.
And the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadari Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
Zadari Enterprises would like to remind you that indeed our R&D department does engage with the romance of men everywhere. Get your giant robot today. Just read the fine print.
Do they have to have like an electron microscope in order to read the fine print?
No. The fine print is where all fine print is normally found.
In the terms and conditions?
Yes.
I thought so. But the last 24 hours, I should note, have been a very interesting time for mech fans. In addition to Mech Builder being getting some brand new updates and being available for $8, and the fact that Mecha Simultactics is getting an update that allows for private lobbies. And then about 6 hours ago, I come across the fact that Hawken is coming back. Not in an official capacity, obviously, but a bunch of fans had reverse engineered a version of it, and it's now playable as a local hosted affair. And trust me, as soon as I figure out a when and where, that is getting its time in the spotlight. So Hawken was fucking great. How could I not?
Hawken was fantastic.
It is BattleTech for those who don't want to be as sweaty as MWO is. Well, MWO can be, unless you're like me and just troll everybody by using a flea.
Mm-hmm.
Flutter, I'm actually underselling how trolly the flea is.
Fair enough.
Oh.
It's a thing. It's a whole ass thing.
I will summarize it as saying it is fast as fuck, boy, which makes it a pain in the ass for people to try and hit it.
Unless they have really good homing weapons.
Which, since a lot of people want to do big gun go burr, looking at you, House Davion, they don't.
Yeah.
But this time around, we are. Some of you may recall that I've talked about how I find an underrated concept to be using mecha in fantasy settings. Whether that be high fantasy, low fantasy, doesn't matter, some sort of fantasy setting. And with this particular entry, it is doing exactly that. And this is one that Zan and a few others have told me I need to watch because I was kicking around the ideas of doing fantasy mecha in my head for the longest time. I mean, yes, I'm aware of Aura Battler Dunbine. Yes, I'm aware of Vision of Escaflowne. I've done whole discussions about the weirdness when it comes to the different versions of Escaflowne.
Yeah.
But I'm not entirely sure how much magic you could say there is with Aura Battler Dunbine.
I can, because most of the mecha are powered by magic.
Yeah.
Like, because it takes place in the Fey realm. I mean, there's a reason that the Aura Battlers look like bugs.
Yeah. And with the whole magic thing with Escaflowne is complicated.
I would almost argue that Escaflowne is near sword and sorcery levels of how magic works.
Depending on the adaptation, I would say yes. And I won't delve too much into this, but I will say this. The anime, the movie, and the manga are almost three completely different stories. Not in terms of the actual story, but in terms of tone.
Yeah, It's not unlike Trigun, where the two animes and manga are entirely different stories almost.
Mhm.
It's mostly just how the stories are handled between
Yeah.
those three sources.
I mean, the anime is, I'd say the anime, it leans a little into high fantasy. The movie very much leans into sword and sorcery. And
Yeah.
the manga is more akin to Maho Shoujo.
Yes.
Now, as far as why that was done, I couldn't tell you. But for this one, we of course are delving into Knights and Magic, which has only had one season's worth of anime, but has had quite a few volumes when it comes to manga.
The real thing here is that
Not manga, light novel.
we also had a manga,
Mhm.
a manga that actually finished. The big thing about Knights and Magic, and this is something I am somewhat sad about, is that the author Hisago Amazaki no has not written any more in the light novels. The last light novel was published in Japan in 2021. We are getting English translations starting as of October last year and having up to 4 volumes as of August this year.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
there's a sort of a fear that this story will not be finished, which would be really, really sad, but that happens to a lot of light novels these days, and it kind of pisses me off. We won't get into that.
Also, thank you, Mario, for gifting one membership to Fallen Plays. I hope you enjoy the ad free, and I appreciate you supporting the temple. Now, that being said, when it comes to Knights and Magic, and I will get into this later, I had half jokingly said that I was ripping this series off without even realizing it. For reasons we'll get into shortly.
Yeah.
I believe I believe the earliest version that it took was the novel series.
Yeah,
which,
the writing on Shosetsuka, which eventually got picked up as a light novel.
Mm-hmm. And then that getting adapted into a manga by Takuji Kato.
Yeah.
Which
It finished too.
I find it funny that the wiki refers to it as a seinen manga.
The manga is run as a seinen.
Oh.
In many different ways. It's a bit darker than the rest of the things we see.
Mm-hmm. And of course the anime, which was handled by Studio 8-Bit. And it seems that they've had quite a few works to their names, and a lot of mecha adjacent stuff. Let's see, Infinite Stratos,
and straight up mecha with Aquarian.
Yeah, Aquarian Evol. We have them working on That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime.
We also have them working on the Fruit of Grisaya. I just bring that up because the Grisaya series is actually really good.
As well as the anime for the Synduality project.
Yep.
Have worked on The Irregular at Magic High School.
Yep.
Had worked on the Macross Frontier movie as a collaboration with Satellite way back in 2009.
Yeah.
And quite a few things for Infinite Stratos, which I remember some people not liking. I only got into like the first couple episodes before I had to drop Infinite Stratos for other reasons. But they seem to do a lot of adaptations, and they were doing a lot of collaborations with Satellite in their early days, probably because they were formed by former Satellite members.
Yeah. Well, and when you say that they've done a lot of mecha and mecha adjacent, I mean, most people don't realize that Infinite Stratos is mecha because they focus on the fact that it's also a harem rom-com.
Mm-hmm. But
I'd also like to point out that no, it's not an April Fool's joke, but 8-Bit became a 100% subsidiary of Bandai Namco Filmworks on April 1st this year.
mm-hmm.
Which makes sense because, well, Bandai Namco likes to use people who do good mecha animation to make more mecha shows, among other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd imagine that that you're probably going to see them work on another mecha project in the next few years.
Yep.
If they aren't doing that already as a helper studio.
Yeah. Now, something I'd like to point out is that we have a writer that we saw just in our last review with Mononoke, Michiko Yokote,
Mm-hmm.
who did lots of work, has done as a helper writer, Pat Labor, Ranma Nibunoichi, the one originally from the 90s, the original Rurouni Kenshin, Cowboy Bebop, was a lead writer on Strange Dawn and Gravitation, did help with Dot Hack Sign, did lead on Genshiken, did lead on XXX Holic, has helped with things like Sergeant Frog and Ayakashi Samurai Horror Tales, and Blood Plus, was a lead on Mononoke, as I mentioned, and is actually a very, as we've mentioned before, achieved writer, both as a supporting writer and as a main writer. I mean, not just Mononoke, but Real Life, another review we've done, was a main writer. And of course, now we're talking Knights and Magic.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things that this writer has done that you can definitely tell they're a strong writer.
Yeah. I will note we did have one weird quirk when it came to the audio, and I'm not sure if this was a screw up during the airing on ATX, or if this was just an error with the version that we were going through. But there were times where, like midway through, they decided to start adding sound effects to the opening, and somebody didn't quite get the volume right on those sound effects.
It that is in all versions of those. That happened even while airing. Those sound effect things were there because they were putting insert previews from later in the episode into the show, and the audio track was just kind of mucked wrong, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where we noticed that.
They did get the volume correct in later episodes, though.
Yeah.
But the whole sound effects continued.
Now, when it comes to the director, this is where it gets tricky to look this up, because it's stated that the director is Yusuke Yamamoto. The problem is, if I look up Yusuke Yamamoto, that's not the guy I get is the actor. The actor and DJ who had in the past played as Fasod.
Yeah. Looking at the staff, or trying to find the staff, I should say. Yusuke Yamamoto has directed things such as Welcome to the NHK, Infinite Stratos, key animations for episode 31 of Gintama. He's done directors for Bigata HK. He's done directing for Valkyrie Romanze.
Mm-hmm.
And Aquarian Evil. So it's likely he's associated with 8-Bit.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what I'm seeing here is a lot of overlap with what 8-Bit has covered, especially more recently, a director for Synduality Noir.
Mm-hmm.
Which, really good anime, really good video game. I hope there's a single player version of that video game, please. Really want it. He also seems to do a lot of mecha, because I also see Overman King Geiner and a few other ones. There was Von Dread as well. So I'm guessing he's got a history. He's been around for a while. And a lot of it's pretty good stuff. So he's got a pedigree as well.
Yeah. And Mario says Yamamoto, the Smith of Japanese last name. That is not the case. The Smith is Yamada.
Yeah, you were thinking Yamada or Yamato. Either one will work.
Mm-hmm. But back in Nadesco, there was that running gag of the man who insisted his name is Gai Daigoji, but his birth name is Jiro Yamada, which is the most boring name you can have.
The name of my soul, Daigoji Gai. Yep.
And the only reason I know that gag is because it was brought up in the extras with the version of Nadesco that I have on DVD. That it is. Yeah. Then if it weren't for the episode count, we would have covered Nadesco in one form or another, I'm certain, just because of all the in jokes that we didn't get when we first saw it, but we get now.
Everything Izumi says, you mean? I'm sorry, wait, what? Everything Izumi says, you mean? Because the woman is a pun machine? Mm-hmm. If she were a real person, I'd marry her? She's a punster after my own heart?
I do recall hearing one of the writers for the dub saying that there was a lot of stuff that was really, really hard to translate.
Yeah.
Which I can believe that because a lot of Japanese puns don't work all that well in English. Let us not forget about Izumi and knives.
Yes. Naifu ga nai.
Yeah. But the arc that we have starts off with a programmer and software engineer named Tsubasa Kurata, who, in addition to being a software engineer, is a mech fan like the rest of us.
He buys gunpla like I do.
Who ends up getting truck-cooned. So yes, this is technically an isekai, and I know some of you are going to be groaning. Do not try and deny that you're groaning in the background. I see you. Here, let me get this out of the way right now. Isekai as a framing device is not bad, and not every isekai is a power fantasy like certain cynics would have you believe. Mm-hmm. It as with all things comes down to execution.
That it does.
And this is no exception. I am well aware that some people have their attitudes regarding isekai. I'm also aware that the rules of the temple have to be followed even when it's inconvenient.
Right.
So
yeah. So here's the big thing. Isekai, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to ruin anyone who thinks that they like things that are better than isekai. Do you like Digimon? Because if you do, you like isekai.
People get really mad at me whenever I tell them that John Carter is technically an isekai.
I mean, we could. Alice in Wonderland is an isekai. You want me to go on? Yeah. Yes, we know Escaflowne is an isekai, or we're well aware of that.
The reason why I point that kind of thing out is because a lot of people have this idea that isekai is this brand new thing. The concept has been around for over a century. Probably even more than that, depending on how you want to look at it. But I will also note that there is a recurring motif with the episode titles, and that is X and Y. Every episode has that set up with its titles.
It's word and word,
mm-hmm.
and it's usually two words that are associated with each other in some way.
Yeah,
like some of the better ones are scrap and build, hide and seek, trial and error, hit and away, heaven and earth.
Mm-hmm. But
And it's always in English, I might add.
But when Tsubasa is reincarnated, it is as Ernesti a Chevalier, also who gets the nickname Eru, which I can understand because a Chevalier I won't say it's a weird spelling, but it is kind of.
Well, it's shortening Ernesti.
Yeah, and Mario's saying, I know isekai is not inherently bad, it's just the last decade it made me weary of the genre. Games not named still applies.
I'm gonna put it this way: the last decade has had a lot more good isekai than you're giving it credit for. I've been watching, on average, 20 to 25 anime per season for the last 6 years, and I can tell you that out of the isekai that I've watched, about 80% of them are good enough for a single watch through or more. So your weariness, while understandable due to some of the big stinkers, such as In Another World with My Smartphone, is still not proven out by all the other good shit we get. Such as the fact that Slime Reincarnation is still going and is still fucking fantastic.
Well, again, the point of games not names, even in something like anime, is everything's got to be taken on its own terms.
Yes, all things should be judged by their own merits.
Mm-hmm. And that is something that Zan has held me to, even when it was inconvenient for me.
It's something I've held myself to in contempt of whatever I'm listening to and gone, I have to do this, I fucking hate it, but I have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I have standards, goddammit. I may be Chaos Incarnate, but I still have fucking standards.
Yeah. But point is, we see Eru's the reincarnation of Tsubata. And I should note there's no hint of, at least as far as I'm aware, there's no hint of any goddess who did the reincarnation. It just happens.
No, he is just reborn as Ernesti.
Mm-hmm.
This is because the anime only went for 13 episodes, there are certain details that get glossed over. Like, a lot of people who only ever saw the anime assume that Tsubasa only woke up as Ernesti at the time that the carriage was attacked and he saw the Silhouette Knights for the first time. No, when he was reborn as Ernesti, he remembered who he was from day one. That's explicit in the light novel. Among other things, like, well, nobody reincarnated him there. He just reincarnated as Ernesti.
Mm-hmm. Who is technically speaking a noble. Is technically speaking the son of a noble in the Framvillia kingdom.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that wonders if the writer had written a series Bible for the world that he created with this.
With how internally consistent it is, yes, I'm almost sure that Hisago Amazaki no very likely has some sort of documentation to keep the world from becoming inconsistent.
Mm-hmm. But the key thing when it comes to the carriage incident is him seeing what's known as a Silhouette Knight, which are the mecha of this world, fighting a monster known as a giant,
Demon Beast.
Yes.
Maju.
Mm-hmm.
Literally Demon Beast.
And that ends up sparking this idea, the notion of I want to be a night runner and pilot a Silhouette Knight
that I made.
Mm-hmm. That is his goal, to make his own night and pilot it. He's at first told he can't because, one, he's too young, since he's not even 12 years old by this point, and two, he's too short.
Oh, and the big thing is that we get a very, very condensed training montage. He gets interested in Silhouette Knights, understands that he has to become good at magic and engineering to even have a chance of piloting one. Learns magic real well, to the point of understanding, hey, this is just like what I did as my job in my last life. It's programming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
that made me laugh when I read that in the book. That he's like, this is just like programming in a programming language. I'm like, oh god, I would be good at magic and hate myself every moment. At least in that world.
I've seen a lot of people lament about how magic is treated like a program, and I'm like, if magic is still just a if you want that whole mystery about magic, what you're really telling me is you want fifis.
Well, not only that, like, it means they want a soft magic system. And if you want an example of a good soft magic system, that's going to be Lord of the Rings. In a soft magic system, you don't have a lot of hard rules, but magic is also used sparingly because without the hard rules, you can't use it super often. It becomes something that is used as much for spectacle as it is for usefulness.
Yeah.
Whereas in Knights and Magic here, magic is very much a hard system. There's chance, there's formula, there's a bunch of different things that all come together to create this magic system. And it is a system. And, of course, this invokes the corollary to Clarke's third law, which, for those who don't remember, Clarke's third law is any significantly advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. The corollary is any significantly studied magic is indistinguishable from science.
And this is where I get into one of the first things that made me realize, wait, I was ripping this anime off without realizing it. Because I've been writing a setting idea that I've called Project Gaia, and within that, one of the key things is this idea of magic and technology being one and the same. Not separated from each other. No, they are two halves of the whole, of the greater whole.
Yeah. And with this establishment of the world and what the hard rules of magic are like, as well as the hard rules of robots, we get the very condensed upbringing until on one of Ernie's training missions, Ernie being the English translation of Eru, because Eru is not a name you would use in English.
Mm-hmm.
But shortening Ernesti to Ernie is very, very natural. He sees two technically bastard children of a noble trying to sneak out, and one of them nearly falls, and he catches them because he's practicing semi-flying with air magic.
Mm-hmm.
And then he becomes best friends with them and starts training them in magic as well. All up until they join, the academy, the Lahyala Academy of Silhouette Knights and Night Runners, which is also a magic academy, the biggest one in all of Fremavilla.
Mm-hmm.
And it run by Ernie's grandfather,
who I'm pretty sure has even more gray hairs than normal because of Ernie's antics.
Also, we just lost. Oh, there he goes.
Sorry about that. Just quick. I was reading.
It's all good. Yeah, but the antics that they go through are things like Ernie upturning the idea of magic rods, because that's what they use to cast magic.
Mm-hmm.
Staves, rods, whatever you want to call them. He turns them into gun swords, literally.
Yeah.
What he calls the gun-like rod, except it's also got a blade on it, so it's a sword as well. And he uses it as a gun arm a few times. Monk was like, it's a variable weapon right now. And then he slashes while casting fire magic in a monster's face. I'm like, not anymore.
Yeah, pretty much. But I will always laugh whenever I see gun blades or the equivalent in given works.
Yes.
And as I mentioned when I was doing the stream of Ultra Age, that's largely because of the years I had to put up with the gunblades that are in practical narrative, which was just people cribbing notes from Noah.
Yeah. But his two friends are the brother and sister duo of Adeltrude and Arkid Olter, also known as Addy and Kid for short.
Mm-hmm.
They're both intrepid, plucky people. Addie is obsessed with how cute Ernie looks, and it kind of semi falls in love with him for that.
And is kind of
Kid
is kind of an airhead, though. As far on the scale of from 1 to Usagi, she's a 7.
On a scale of 1 to... No, Monk, I've got it for you. On a scale from 1 to Usagi, she's Mihoshi from Tenchi.
That is fine.
I know my scale pretty well. Also, that should be a deep cut for everyone watching.
Yes.
She's competent, if only a little airheaded. That's why I said Mihoshi, because Mihoshi was a galactic patroller that was really good at her job until she met Tenchi and fell in love with him, like all the other women in that fucking anime.
Yeah.
Oh, but one of the most classic rom-com errands. Anyway, the entire climax of just this first episode, which we did have to go over individually because of the fact that this first episode is very dense, is that Ernie goes, I don't want to be in these elementary classes where I already know everything. How do I get out? And the teacher goes, okay, if you can prove you have the mana control and capacity necessary to test out, you can test out. And he does that on the live fire training area and goes, can I be excused now? And the guy's like, uh-huh. And he goes and joins the middle school level classes for learning how to engineer silhouette knights.
Mm-hmm.
Which creeps out all of the class members there. They're like, why is this short kid who's from the elementary school here?
Also, why is he so, for lack of a better term, earnest about it?
He's very enthusiastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But that is the climax of the episode, in my opinion, because the next section where they go on the training arc and you meet some of the other cool supporting cast members, including the technically student council president and half-sister to Addie and Kid, as well as the 3 older classmates that are actual Night Runners with their 3 very unique silhouette knights. Mm-hmm. One having a shield, the other using 2 swords, and the third using one of the standard models to its utmost.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, during this training mission, a giant behemoth attacks, crushes a wall, and Mr. Two Swords, Dietrich,
also known
runs
as
away runs away as a screaming coward. And Ernie takes over his mecha. He's like, I can't reach the pedals. What am I gonna do? And rips out the arm controls to the mecha, wraps the wires around his gun-like rods, and reprograms what's called the Magius engine, which is essentially the OS for the silhouette knight, so that he can use it as is. It also pushes it beyond its limits by quite a bit, and by the end of the fight, which was really fucking good and ended with a well, you got a sword through your eye touching your brainstem, time to electrocute you to death moment. The wreckage of the Guer, as it's called, is an eye-opener to all of the Knightsmiths. And the Knightsmiths are like, what did you do to your knight? It's like, it wasn't me, it was the little kid. The little kid's like, yeah, if you overwrite the Magius engine, it turns out you can push it beyond the built-in limiters, which uses a lot of mana, and also causes metal fatigue. And the Knightsmiths are just like, you're a fucking genius, and also, what the fuck?
Pretty much.
But that's where Ernie gets really a lot closer to the 3 upperclassmen, Edgar, Helvey, and, well, D.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also where his dream of piloting a silhouette knight and his dream of being an engineer really combine to condense into, I'm going to make a silhouette knight just for me that works exactly as I want it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this also brings him to the attention of the king.
And the fact that there's some very, very big obstacles. One, nobody's made a brand new silhouette knight in about 200 years. It's been 200 years since a new model has been made. I believe the number was.
It was 100 years.
It was 100
It was
years.
Right.
The history of Silhouette Knights was something like almost 400 years ago. The first Silhouette Knight in Fremvilla was widespread and military useful was made, and then it took 300 years of constant small improvement to get the model that they've been using for the last 100 years. But that's a later plot point.
The other big problem is some, and this is why the attention of the king was important. Some of the parts when it comes to making a new Silhouette Knight are national secrets.
Specifically, the composition and ability to create ether reactors, which are used to transmute the ether in the air into mana for the Silhouette Knights to use as their power source. But he gets noticed by the king for killing the behemoth, and the king's like, "Hey, I want to give you a prize." And that's when Ernie goes, "I want to know how to make an ether reactor." It's because
this stuns everybody else because they're like, "Dude, what the fuck are you doing?"
And the king's like, "But why though?" And Ernie's like, "Well, I want to make my own Silhouette Knight so I can ride it." And he's like, "But why though?" He's like, "Because it's my hobby." That was a fucked up answer, straight up. And then, of course, the king goes, "All right, one condition. Show me you can make a Silhouette Knight worthy of knowing the ether reactor, and I will give you the secrets to the ether reactor." And this starts just the coolest set of, I'm going to improve technology way too fast, way too much in the entire show. The first, Ernie decides that he's going to change the way the mana circuits within the Night Runners or the Silhouette Knights work, because they use this thing called crystal tissue, which acts both as muscle tissue within the Knight and the way that mana is transferred through the Knight. He decides to twist it together in braids to create strand type crystal tissue, so it's more like actual muscle strands, which A, makes it way more powerful, but B, also increases its mana consumption.
Which, when it comes to a lot of the engineering scenes, I find very amusing, because they end up solving a problem, and in the process ends up creating a whole new problem, which is not far removed from the engineering process as it is.
Yeah, that's actual engineering right there. The other thing he does is he's like, "We can make our weapons much more efficient. You don't have to continue to keep the human shape." Like, "Yes, you do. That's why we can control it so well." He's like, nah, you just put two small arms on the back that are holding rods, make some simple automation in the Magius engine, and you don't need to have any, like, big sweeping movements and have it act exactly like human arms. They're just back turrets. So yes, he adds back weapons to the entire lineup. On the other side, as a fucking byproduct of his development, he creates exo armors called the Silhouette Gears. Now, don't think that this is just some throwaway thing. These are plot significant. Yes, even byproducts of engineering are useful plot significance.
And this was where I really started to get that feel of, wait, was I ripping this off without realizing it? Especially since just behind the throne room there's a goddamn mech. Just
behind the throne is the king's mech.
Because within the Gaia setting, I had set up that there were certain mechs that were the pride and joy of certain nations, with the price of, if you have to ask, you can't afford it. And miniaturized versions of mecha for more one-on-one use.
Yeah. The big thing here is that they add on all these things. They create the Silhouette Gears, which they're useful just for labor purposes alone, but they can also be used as weapons for sure. And
they
in fact,
are effectively power armor.
Yeah, he even mounts weapons to them, like a giant crossbow that shoots harpoons that can crush stone. It's basically the bow from fucking Monster Hunter on the arms of these things. But in the end, they use their test bed unit called the Telestale to fight the sword and shield unit from Edgar. And the Telestale nearly wins, but then mana runs out, and that's where they find out that mana consumption's too high. And they have to continue working on that. In some cases, they put on too much mana storage, and that's an issue. On other cases, they try out other things, and eventually come to a nice balance. But it's at this point that the father for Addie and Kid originally asked them, hey, if that kid does anything good, let me know. I'll tell the king, and it'll only reflect well on him. But it was actually because this marquis is because their father is a subordinate to a different marquis. He reports it to that marquis first, and that marquis requisitions all of the new units. And on the way, they are ambushed by various demon beasts that were summoned out by cursed bait, which is a thing that's basically illegal in the country, since that country is the first line of defense against all demon beasts and the rest of the continent. And then the Telestales, the other testbed units, can defeat the Shaker Worms, but Ernie just kills one himself without a robot, basically. And he's at this.
I believe around this time there was the notion brought up that Ernie really has a strong distaste for the idea of mechs not fighting other mechs.
It's not the biggest thing. He understands that the mecha defeating kaiju are a good thing and a necessary thing. But he says that a mecha should never be defeated by a kaiju. That only a mecha should take down another mecha. That's his aesthetic, as he calls it.
Yes.
When they finally arrive at the fort, the Marquis is like, hey, he's the one that explains the production procession of robots up until present day, and he's like, hey, you have changed everything, flipped it upside down. This is all very dangerous. You should stop that. He's like, no, because if I don't make it, nothing will ever move forward. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to report all this to the king. And Ernie's just like, yeah, okay, sure, do that. And the Marquis is like, what? You don't want the accolades? He's like, I don't care about the accolades. I just want to make them. If you report everything and take all the accolades, but I get to make the stuff, I don't give a fuck. That is Ernie's particular focus. But we also find out, or we saw earlier before they left, that there's another group spying on this engineering group, wanting to affect them in some way, whether that's to sabotage or otherwise, we're not quite sure. While Ernie and the Telestales are at the fort, this mercenary group uses more cursed bait to cause demon beasts to attack a village to lure out the Order of Knights that are guarding the fort, take them out, steal one of their robots, and sneak in that way. At the same time, Ernie's been at the fort for a week, and his friends are worried about him because they're a bunch of fucking worrywarts. And decide to use the excuse of delivering all new units, which includes the silhouette gears, to the fort to go and see him. And so they go off to the fort as well, accompanied by Edgar and Dietrich. Now, the mercenary group, later identified as the Night Order of the Bronze Fang, led by a woman named Kurhild, get in, start wrecking the place, steal some of the Telestales, and are now fighting against the company that's at the fort. Ernie can't do anything because he doesn't have a robot or a silhouette gear at the time, but he does oversee things and kind of he can't, I should put can't do anything in quotes, because there's a point where he kind of distracts things, and then once his silhouette gear finally arrives, he starts rewriting the magic in the enemies using their telestales, because it's stuff he's designed, so of course he can rewrite it, and causing them to literally kill themselves. Which was the funniest part. The two rods pointed directly at the fucking back of the cockpit and blew the guy up.
Yeah.
At the same time, the rest of the Order of the Bronze Fang is escaping, and they're the ones that encounter Kid, Addie, Dietrich, and the rest on their way to the fort. So before Ernie gets his silhouette gear, this happens.
Mm-hmm.
Kid and Addie dismount in their silhouette gears to assist Dietrich and Edgar, who are fighting the Telestales. With the help of Kid and Addie, of course, they help take out one Telestale, but the Telestale that Kurhilt is piloting actually overpowers Edgar, but doesn't kill him. But then there's more cursed bait and more demon beasts, and they can't chase Kurhilt out to whatever country she might be working for.
So, even the worst case scenario was avoided, but still, you have one of the mechs being stolen, and that ends up being a Chekhov's gun for later.
Yep. And it's also because of this that the king goes, okay, so I saw that you can engineer good, and I saw that you're also a pretty good fighter, so here's the thing. You're going to be the head of all the Silhouette Knight development and a Knight Order named the Silver Phoenix. Here you go.
Mm-hmm.
But this now pisses off the Silhouette Knight Laboratory from Villa. And
the fucking gnome.
He's a human monk. He's not actually a gnome.
I know, but with that nose.
Actually, I'm pretty sure he's one of the dwarves because of the ears.
Probably, but he doesn't come off very dwarfy.
He doesn't, unlike the other dwarves, but he's also really old, monk.
Yeah.
But he's pissed off, and he's like, that kid is an upstart, and he's not making anything that's sustainable. Watch, I'll just show you how we can make good things, and they're mass producible. And so there's that little back current going along. But at the same time, the Silver Phoenix gets a bunch of Kaldatoas, which are the most current units, from the Marquis as part of the promise to them, and also gets an attaché from the Order of the Azure Hawk, an intelligence Knight Order, named Nora Freakberg, who Addie gets jealous of for a second until Nora goes, there's nothing between us, which makes Addie even more suspicious until she goes and talks to Ernie and realizes Ernie's just Ernie. He's not interested in girls. He's interested in robots.
Mm-hmm.
And so they keep creating new gear, silhouette gears for the Knightsmiths so that the Knightsmiths can use them for labor, and creating new robots. And they create a two-seater robot shaped like a centaur called the Senzolg.
Yep.
They also create ignition keys. Who'd have thunk? Oh,
So-
you can make it so that these robots can't start up unless you put in a very specific, attuned magical key? Huh!
Which is a case of, why didn't anyone think of this sooner?
Probably because nobody had ever tried to steal Silhouette Knights from each other before. Not in a way of subterfuge. They probably just picked up Silhouette Knights off the battlefield when they had battles.
Probably.
But this isn't the only one he makes. He does make the Senzolg. He also makes more Telestales and other things. And then he makes the Toy Box. But not before he experiments with trying to create a literal magical jet engine and nearly killing himself.
Because he forgot to. If I could liken it to one thing, it would be one of my favorite Darwin Award stories. A man
The guy
decided, who attached solid fuel rocket boosters to his car,
Yeah.
and When they found what was left of the car, the brakes were down to the metal and the whole car was in pieces.
Jesus.
Yeah. The one that always gets me is the guy who attached jet-assisted takeoff units to his car, and they found his car impacted in the side of a cliff 70 or 80 feet up. That's always a good one.
Mm-hmm.
But with this, they're then challenged to a mock battle, I guess is the best way to put it, between the new model that the Silhouette Night Laboratory and the Silver Phoenix are creating. And we get a really cool ending. It's a draw, technically. What the Silhouette Night Laboratory did is they took the Telestale, they improved it by making it mass producible, but keeping the same amount of strength and the back arms and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So a stock fighting force compared to what Ernie has been doing, where he creates tailor-made robots,
including, I believe D's approach was give the sword guy more swords. Since even though he ran away like a coward, he has been going out of his way to not fall into that same trap again.
Yeah. It's not so much Dietrich was given more swords, it's more that Dietrich was given more maneuverability and more swords.
Mm-hmm.
Because, after all, he's not the guy from a place we'll talk about later who does nothing but swords. With Swordsman and the Dead Man's Sword.
Yeah.
Yes, those are both the name of his mecha. Yes, he is not very imaginative.
Meanwhile, upping the sword and board approach to having a sword and board that doesn't require the use of one of the arms. To hold,
yeah, the shields are on the sub arms.
Mm-hmm.
The shields also have magic rods inside them, so they can open up and shoot magic when they need to.
Yep.
It's fucking great.
Mm-hmm.
But after the match is over and Ernie and the dwarf leader of the Night Laboratory get together talking about robots because they bonded over robots. The entire group graduate from the academy and they move into an actual fort as a Night Order. So they're now a standing combat force that is still researching Silhouette Knights. And at that point, the king that has been helping them is like, I'm going to retire now and leave the kingdom to my kid.
Although, the graduation from the academy at that point felt like a formality.
I mean, it kind of was, but it still needed to be noted.
Mm-hmm.
And it still needed to be official. But, Ambrosius is like, I'm going to retire. I my son, who is more level-headed than me, is going to take over. By the way, here's my grandson, the prince, who resembles me in my youth a lot, apparently. And he goes to Ernie. He's like, I want you to make me and that guy over there, my grandson, custom units. And we get the Goldleo and Gilberaiga, or Silver Liger and Gold Lion is what it's supposed to be. And they're supposed to have they have a duel with each to see who gets the gold one.
Because unfortunately they are similar people and both very very hot-headed.
Not only that,
despite their difference in age.
although I'm sure Monk identifies more with Ambrosius than Emrys because Ambrosius has polearm brain rot.
Yes.
Exactly. Ambrosius in the Gilberaiga uses a spear, whereas Emrys uses a greatsword.
Mm-hmm.
And Ambrosius concedes the match, but Ernie realizes that Ambrosius was just testing Emrys. And then Ambrosius goes, by the way, you're taking my son with you on your campaigns. And he's like, wait, the fuck? And it's finally at this point where Go. No, you go ahead. What were you gonna say?
And considering his status, that's not necessarily an order he can defy.
Yes, true. That's true. But it's at this point that there's an attack on a city known as Alfheim, which is the only thing known about the city is that this is where the ether reactors that Fremvilla makes are all produced. And so it's a strategic resource. And there's a giant beast wave going towards it. And so the Silver Phoenix is dispatched to defend it. Ambrosius and Emrys go with him. And at the time, Ernie kills the shell-cased queen, this giant bug-like queen demon beast, which is just as formidable as the behemoth was previously. Mm-hmm. And it's at that point that Ambrosius goes, by the way, I'm going to fulfill that wish you asked me for now. I'm going to teach you how ether reactors are created. And is taken to Alfheim, where he spends 3 months, and he's the only one who gets to go in to meet the Ulves, which are the elves of this series, except they have long ears.
They have long ears, and not assholes, and as they advance in age, they end up spending less time being active and more time in a kind of sleep where they're just thinking.
Yes, they become very, very much a it's almost a psychic sleep of sorts. But he finds out that the catalysts to create ether reactors are the cores of demon beasts. And the bigger and more powerful the demon beast, the better the ether reactor, and the more powerful the ether reactor that they create. It is at this point that Ambrosius goes, by the way, since you basically took down both the behemoth and that queen by yourself, you get to use their cores to make your ether reactor. And it is at this point that Ernie finally creates his personal Silhouette Knight, using a double ether reactor consisting of the behemoth's heart and the queen's coronet, a Silhouette Knight known as the Ikaruga.
There is one other thing to note here, and that's the method of creating the reactors.
Yes.
One might say, well, only they can make them, and it would be easy to say, oh, that's just Alvin arrogance. No, in this case, it is a natural biological ability that they have when it comes to molding them.
Yeah, they have a natural biological ability to mold the actual reactors and imprint the formula on them that way. And it takes Ernie observing them for 3 months. It took him 3 months, which is a long time for Ernie, to understand the method by which they were doing it and replicate it using magic instead.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So he developed a way that he can create ether reactors now without needing all help. He'd be the only person that can do it. He wouldn't be able to teach it to anyone else. They wouldn't have the capability.
Yeah.
But the Ikaruga takes the ideas of the toy box and a few other things and just and the ideas of the gun-like rods and the ideas of the Magius jet thrusters and just turns them into a giant, well, it's a robot. It's a giant robot that looks a lot like Japanese armor in many ways, that wields 2 swords that are also gun swords.
Mm-hmm.
And also, unlike the head cameras of every other mecha in the series, it has stereoscopic cameras that look like eyes.
Yep.
Which ends up that, along with several other things, causes it to get the nickname of the Grim Reaper,
Or the demon of the battlefield. There are 2.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just one last thing there. This is the only Silhouette Knight that flies.
Yeah.
Under its own power. I should be specific. Flies under its own power. Because we finally get to learn who the villains of this arc are. They are the Zalodek Kingdom. And they're conquering everything west of the mountains separating Fremvilla from the rest of the world. They think it is their God's given right to take over the continent and fuck anybody else who thinks otherwise. And they're doing it using giant zeppelins called levitate ships.
Mm-hmm. Along with black silhouette knights that were built upon the stolen mech that we saw earlier.
Yes, the Tyranto. They're called the Tyrantos. The Tyrantos are, you can very clearly see they stole something from, that this is where the stolen technology went, because they have back weapons, among other things. But there are things that went into it from Zalodek that are also big improvements. Power improvements, weapon improvements, etc. We'll get into one of the improvements that is the most powerful, but also the most wasteful later.
Mm-hmm.
And it is because Zalodek is starting to conquer places that are allied with Fremvilla and have members of Fremvillian royal families present, especially people who married into, because, you know, political marriages are a thing between royalty and nobility, that King Leotamus says, hey, my sister Martina is, you know, married to the king of Kushperka. Go save her and them if you can. Go, Order of the Silver Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And the Order of the Silver Phoenix goes undercover as the Silver Phoenix Merchant Association. Yes, because a merchant association has a bunch of custom silhouette knights and a giant fucking carriage that carries more silhouette knights inside of it. Totally! That's totally just some merchants, guys!
Yeah.
But, Martina and Martina's daughter Isolda, along with the princess of Kushperka, Eleonora, managed to escape because the king fights Cristobal, the prince of Zalodek, and leader of their current invasion forces, for a very long time. But even when they escape, they still get captured. And this is where Ernie finds out that, hey, this is where the stolen Telestale went, to Zalodek. Because they fight some Tyrantos and like, hey, that's ours! And then they hear that Eleonora is going to be forced to marry Prince Cristobal in order for Zalodek to have, you know, an actual legitimate claim to Kushperka and absorbing and annexing it.
Mm-hmm.
And they do eventually get attacked by some of the Zalodek forces in a levitate ship by a man named Gustave Mardones. But they get their... Zalodek gets its ass whooped when the Ikaruga makes its maiden voyage in the anime. And he's like, whoa, how does this work? And he's like flying around it, landing on it, looking at how the engines work. And they're like, oh, run away! And they run away.
Mm-hmm.
But they also decide to go after Eleonora and rescue her, along with Martina and Isolda. And they do so in silhouette gears. By sneaking into the cities they're being held, getting their silhouette gears, and doing a clandestine insertion into the castle. And all they know is that Eleonora is being held in one tower, and there are 4. So the 4 of them, Kid, Addie, Ernie, and Emrys. Yeah, he got his own silhouette gear, which is bigger than everybody else's because he's a giant of a man. They all sneak in. Ernie finds Martina and grabs her. Emrys finds Isolda and grabs her. Emrys and Isolda are cousins, and so she's like, I recognize you, let's get out of here. And Martina's just like, oh, you're a knight from Fremvilla. Get me the hell out of here. Addie finds an empty tower. Kid finds Eleonora. And Eleonora's just like, leave me.
Eleonora means well, but she's kind of a idiot.
it's not that she's an idiot. It's that she has a very defeatist mindset at the time due to all the bad things that have happened.
Mm-hmm.
And she thinks that if she just submits to Zalodek and goes along with what they're asking, the fighting will stop and the people will stop dying. She's got a good intention in her heart. Kid knows that that's not what's going to actually happen, so he's just like, hey, okay, I swear to be your knight, let's get out of here. And she's like, finally, okay, let's get out of here. And they get out of there.
Although the whole swearing to be her knight ends up putting Kid in some awkward situations afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I think we dedicated a later scene to everyone pick on Kid Day.
Yeah, that was pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
Once they actually save them, they establish a base in another city in Kushperka called Nishirie, and they make a deal. Hey, we'll help you. The entire Order of the Silver Phoenix will help you if you let us keep the spoils of everything we kill. Essentially, scraps of all enemy units defeated to them.
Basically, basically negotiating salvage rights.
Yes. And they go, and we'll even upgrade your mech so that they work better. And then there's a siege on Nishirie where the Kushperkin Silhouette Knights have 4 back weapons and giant shields on their fronts so that they have 6 rods and are basically siege tower cannons. It's great. It was fantastic. I loved it. This also pushes away, the Bronze Fang Knights and Kurhilt and this pushes away the rest of Zalodek, but Kurhilt and her Bronze Fang Knights are ordered to go find Princess Eleonora and kill her and assassinate her. Except the Silver Phoenix was expecting that. They were also expecting the Bronze Fang Knights to try and steal their mecha again. And they're like, you don't have the key, motherfucker! And beat the shit out of them and then come out in their mechs. And Lady Kurhilt is finally killed in battle against Edgar, who finally gets back at her. He's like, you may have defeated me back at Fort Casadesis, but now I'm defeating you. And Kurhilt dies.
There was also she, even to the end, was too much of a schemer.
Yeah.
Which, you know how it is with these kind of things. Somebody who's good at scheming, they rely on that too much, and that ends up biting them in the ass. Or in this case, giving them a very crushing defeat.
I really don't like this this translation for our enemy scientist that invented the levitate ships. Because even on Super Robot Wars 30, it's an H-O and a K, not an O and a G.
Yeah, it's Horatio.
Horatio Kojas, but we'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
I
should note Kojas is just close enough to Hojo to raise my eyebrow.
I mean, the way he acts. But the after the Order of the Bronze Fang is destroyed, Cristobal's just like, fuck this full war fronting, and just pushes forward as fast as he can to destroy the Kushpersian forces in order to capture Eleonora. However, this is actually a trap. Because, Ernie invented spear missiles. He calls them the Mishair javelins.
Mm-hmm. That's a bit.
Which are wire guided for half of it,
mm-hmm.
for half of their flight.
Yep.
And he defeats. He defeats all of the Cristobal's forces, including Cristobal himself. And Cristobal's like, fuck this, I'd rather die. And instead falls and gets crushed by his own levitate ship than letting his mecha be captured. Because Cristobal at first tries to say, hey, how about this demon of the battlefield Grim Reaper guy? Join Zaludek. I can double what they're paying you. And Ernie goes, will you give me all the rights to create all of your Silhouette Knights? Because that's the position I have in Fremvilla. And he's like, stop joking with me and lying. He's like, no, really, I have all of the production rights and, in the event of an emergency, command of all forces higher than the king. And, well, Horatio is there wanting to see who's engineering this flying Silhouette Knight and how they fly and how it's taking down his levitate ships. Mm-hmm. And Horatio sees that the Ikaruga flies using explosions, as he calls it, which is how a jet works. That's essentially how a jet works. Controlled explosions.
You know what's the funny part about this? Earlier today, I was watching a mini doc answering the question, why doesn't F1 try to use jet engines?
Wow.
The answer to that is, well, they did back in '66. It didn't work.
Or rather, it did work just too well.
Actually, they had it was more of an issue of slowing down on those turns. It worked really well on the Indy 500, but trying to do it on anything that wasn't an oval course didn't quite work, and even on the Indy, it still had problems.
Well, what I'm saying, Monk, is as a jet engine, it worked too well.
Yeah.
You can't turn on a dime with a jet engine unless you are shaped like a fucking jet.
You also can't throttle it at the same speed.
Yes. But with the death of Cristobal, Eleonora officially coronates as the Queen of Kushperka, and decides that they're going to start taking back their lands. And they start taking back their lands, doing really well. And then Horatio Kojas, which I don't know why this translation says Horatio Gojas. That's not even the katakana.
Is that like that whole misreading of Grimjaw back in the days of Bleach? How the dub referred to him as Greenjaw Jaggerjak?
Yeah, it might be. But I would like to point out that in Super Robot Wars 30, which has an official North American translation, the translation is Horatio Kojas. And if I can find the Japanese, at some point, I will do so. I will probably do that when we're done with this episode. I'll spin up 30, turn on Japanese text and take a look.
Mm-hmm.
But Kojas is pissed off that this guy is flying using explosions instead of his fancy schmancy Zeppelin design. But he says, but I can't create a weapon that will surpass Ikaruga here.
Yeah, it's just that the weapon in question happens to be a fucking dragon.
A drake.
Uh-huh.
It only has 2 legs, Monk. Dragons have 4 limbs plus wings, not 2 limbs plus wings. It's a giant airship shaped like a drake. That also has a cannon in its mouth that is a bunch of rod weapons put together along with a giant emitter in order to breathe giant fire. Named the Viver, which is, well, for anyone who knows anything about the tiniest bit of etymology, that's just a reference to the word wyvern.
Yep.
But the Viver is being piloted by Doloteo Mardones, the guy who went and found them before, whose son Gustavo was the guy with the swordsman machine, and now is battling Dietrich in this battle while the Ikaruga fights the Viver.
And I believe in that fight that was where the one addition that Zolodek made to their mechs gets showcased, and subsequently why that addition was a bad idea.
Yeah. Earlier, once Cristobal died and Ernie got a hold on the levitate ships, he found out that not only do they have an ether reactor, they have like this ether booster, which uses high capacity condensed ether to inject mana into an ether reactor as fast and as high as possible. This is good for increasing power and also having a longer mana supply. This is bad for an ether reactor because it increases strain on it so high that it burns out. The same thing happens when Dietrich is fighting Gustavo in the in Gustavo's swordsman. Dietrich wins by pushing that beyond its mana supply and its ether booster. I forget what the actual name was.
Yeah. I think we likened it to being a poor man's Trans Am, but with way too much drawback.
Yes. At the same time, Ernie and the Weaver are neck and neck. The mana of the Weaver is almost exhausted, and the Ikaruga is about to finally take it down. And they release a chaff grenade that affects the magical engram on the inside of the Magi's jet thrusters that causes them to thrust, actually destroying the ability for the Ikaruga to fly. But they also have to retreat at that point. So Ernie designs a filter to keep that from happening in the future. And the Weaver is given an even bigger ether reactor called the Blood Grail that will, according to Horatio, give it unmatched power, but that power may go out of control and everybody might die. At the same time, Gustavo, whose swordsman has been destroyed by Dietrich, is given the Alcalorix, the suit that Cristobal previously used, as his own, which he turns into what he calls the Dead Man's Sword.
Mm-hmm.
And at a strategy meeting that the Silver Phoenix, the Kushperkins, and the Fremvillains are having to determine how they're going to take on Zaludek, they go through various strategies of how they might do things now that the Weaver is on the field. And eventually Eleonoria goes, well, if we can't do any of those because it leaves us open to one type of counterattack or another, why don't we just strike at the heart of things and force them to meet us on our terms? Which is, let's go back and strike at what used to be the former capital of Kushperka to try and take it back and drive Zaludek all the way back to its own borders. And that's what they do. And they're going to fight the Zaludeks at the last fortress that leads to Devincool. Or Delvincool, excuse me. And the Weaver arrives. Horatio's on board the Weaver as well because he wants to see how the Blood Grail works. And as it arrives to kill the Queen because she's there in person, Ernie and all of his friends show up on a captured and reconstructed Levitate ship that has its own set of jet thrusters that he's put on it. And it looks very close to parts of Space Battleship Yamato. I get exactly what they were calling out for there.
Yeah.
A Japanese battleship, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
With the Ikaruga sitting on top. And they use this ship to lure the Weaver away from the rest of the battlefield so that Ernie can fight it. And they shoot at it with the missiles, the javelin missiles, which are in this case are actually airburst missiles that cover the Weaver in oil, and then they set it on fire.
Yep.
But Doloteo says, fuck that, activates the Blood Grail, and the Blood Grail causes the mana of the Weaver to go so far amok that it emits outside of the Weaver, makes it look like it's blown up to epic-sized proportions, but it's really just a bunch of mana energy.
Right.
And at this point, now the Ikaruga is fighting a giant dragon-shaped mana emission in the sky. On land, because Dietrich's Guerlinde, the upgrade to the Guer, it was wrecked in its fight with the swordsman, he's in an infiltration group with Nora Freakberg and the rest of the Azure Hawk to go into the fortress, take over the drawbridge, and let the rest of the Fremvillen and Kushperkin forces in. They succeed, but Gustavo is there with his dead man's sword to stop Edgar and to stop the rest of the forces. And Edgar's fight with the dead man's sword is huge. It's really cool. And at the last moment, he's holding on to the dead man's sword. It looks like he's been defeated. He's like, but you're alone and I'm not. Go for it, Emrys. And Emrys with the Gold Leo on the other drawbridge across from them uses the Gold Leo's blast howling to blast away Gustavo.
Right.
But Ernie decides, hey, if that's just mana, if I break through, then I'm fine. And he breaks through the mana, gets inside, defeats the Viver as it is. And so Doloteo takes over a mecha that's built into the head of the Viver, which this whole thing is the fight of the Viver versus the Ikaruga is a euphemism for the aesthetics of the two engineers, those being Horatio and Ernie. And Horatio's like, bigger, better weapons is what's going to rule the battlefield. He's like, no, fuck you. We don't need bigger, better weapons. Mecha are the best. And that's part of why he's trying to defeat it. Because if not, then the development of weapons will only go towards bigger, better things. And Mecha will go by the wayside. And then what happens to a man's romance? Because robots are a man's romance.
That they are.
Doloteo, using this mecha embedded in the head of the Viver, aims to just ram the crashing ship into Princess, Queen at this point, Eleonora. And Ernie's trying to turn it, but he can't. And so Kid jumps out in his... I forget what the full name on the Senzol single-person versions were. But he jumps out of the battleship in which both him and his sisters, Senzolgs, were being used as reactors, and jumps onto the back of the Viver and defeats Dolioteo, but then he's going to fall with it because, well, of course, the Senzolgs can't fly. And Ernie's like, just get out of... Ernie's just like, get out of the thing and get in the hands of the Ikaruga, and he does.
And the one-person version is called the Zendolimbo.
Thank you. The Zendolimbo. Our living wiki doing his job very well. Thank you. But finally, after that all happens, they win the battle. They take over the fortress. Princess Catalina, who was there, has poisoned and killed herself. And the actual main... the main prince back in Zaludek itself, who's being the ruler, is like, my little brother and little sister are dead, and all my forces defeated? Fuck. Horatio escaped the Viver before it collapsed. And Ernie is taking back his friends on the new Levitate ship that his Levitate ship with jet thrusters on it that he has. Before they leave, Eleonora meets Kid one more time to talk to him and try and spark some romance. He fumbles the ball because, well, it's Kid. He is still literally just a teenager. But he also kind of saves himself pretty cool, like saying, I'm not good enough for her yet. Next time we meet, maybe I will be. And as they're flying away on their Levitate ship with jet engines, Horatio in this little hovercraft is like, looks at the Levitate ship and the jets, and he's like, okay, Ernie, you're a good engineer after all. But then we find out that Horatio didn't give a shit about Zaludek. He's just been selling his services to the highest bidder, and he's going to go find someone else. And then finally, when we get back to Fremavilla, Ambrosius, who, while having retired as king, is still somehow, for some reason, on the throne, says, hey, Silver Knights, good job. Do you have a wish? And Ernie's like, I want my own laboratory. And he gets his own laboratory, and his airship technology spreads amongst countries, which allows trade and transportation to evolve as well. And that's the end of the anime.
Mm-hmm. With it hinting at a dawning of an age of sail, an age of ships.
Yes.
And then closing off by saying, but that is another story.
Yes, the age of the airship.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read the web novel past that, the light novel past that point. I know some other things that happened, but that's neither here nor there. The story is very compressed and condensed for a 13-episode thing, but it does get all the important points across really well compared to the light novel. So you are getting enough of the story for it to be impressive, just like how impressive No Game No Life was with its 12 episodes.
Yes, but with all of that said, I think it's time we move into our final judgments.
Before we get there, two things I have to make of note, Monk. One, the audio identity of Knights and Magic is marvelous. The opening theme, My World, Hello My World by Fauna, is a bop that will get stuck in your head, and we never skipped it once. And the actual sound effects, while some of them you may have heard in other places, the way they're used are phenomenal.
I think it's also worth noting, and I'm mainly pointing this out because of my background, but the use of CG with this anime was well integrated.
That's the second thing I was going to bring up, actually.
And that's saying something, because anyone who knows me knows that I'm not the biggest fan of CG use in anime, because a lot of times it takes me out of the moment.
So, primarily CG was used for mecha and mecha-related things. Whether it was the silhouette gears or the silhouette knights, or the giant carriage behind the Sendolimbes, or the levitate ships, or even the Viver itself. Those were what was CG. And it was really good CG. But the best part about it is that the CG interpolation with the actual drawn anime was flawless. You did not get the sense of floatiness or the sense of no impact that you sometimes get with CG that isn't interpolated incorrectly. The CG was flawless.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the two things I wanted to bring up. So now on to final deliberations. Brother Flutter, what's your rating? Give us what you got. Flutter?
Good. Guy who's as weak as the Cyberman says what?
Not even that worked. Flutter! Where you go, Flutter?
I could always say Dark Magician Girl is worst girl, and he'd probably come back.
He's muted.
That usually works.
Oh, wait, hold on. He said give him a second. Okay, well then, guess what, Monk? We're going to you first for once. What do you got for me?
So, as I said, I joked about the notion that I ripped this anime off without realizing it. If only because there were several ideas that it's using that I was using in my own notes without realizing it, but that's more of a convergent creativity than actively ripping off. You'll find that happens a lot more often whenever someone calls something a rip-off of something else. But with that in mind, I know it would be tempting to say that some of this feels a bit power fantasy regarding Eru, but it really isn't. And there's multiple cases where people have reactions to how Eru acts like he's completely knucking butts.
Oh yeah, no. There are times where Ernie treats everything as if he's designing a robot, and people look at him like, dude, people are not robots.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one. That's true. Also, no, I'll get to it on my point. You keep going.
The point is that he's not a Gary Stu self-insert. He's clearly hyper fixated on mecha, but has a problem seeing the bigger picture in things. But once he understands that, is willing to defer to other people regarding that. that's the reason why I'm not willing to jump on the Gary Stu bandwagon in this instance. I know it's tempting to do that with isekai, but when you're doing that, you're painting whole swaths of media with a broad brush, and that is very shallow thinking, like Reset era shallow thinking.
Monk, calling Reset Era's version of thinking shallow is an insult to puddles everywhere.
Yes, but they are filled with mud.
No, that's an insult to mud everywhere, Monk. That's an insult to shit everywhere.
Fair enough.
Reset Era is worse. Reset Era is a new level of bad.
Yes, and they will, and their ilk and people who are, possessed of delusions of adequacy, will always be in that particular category. But
yes,
the point is that I would say the biggest star of Knights and Magic is the world itself. That's not to say there aren't arcs to go with. Although I would say of the main trio, the one who doesn't change too much is Addie, but she's not meant to.
Despite her airheadedness, she's also meant to be the voice of constancy.
Yeah. And overall, there is a gradual progression. Then the same you have the notion of progressing technology, much in the same way you saw progressing technology in stuff like, say, Dr. Stone. Not in the same scale, obviously, because you've only got 13 episodes, but the same energy.
Yes.
You have the fact that there are some unique things that are done with this world and with the technology in it, and it's largely kept consistent. I think the biggest thing that I took out of this is that I want more of this world. Whether that be even if that isn't through another anime. I know there's the light novels and there's the manga, but what I would pay real good money for is a full-on series Bible art book, like a production Bible book. You know, that goes into the whole map, goes into the different areas and all that. Basically, I would basically want something akin to Where's Blade, which I'm looking forward to seeing the translation of that next year.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
I've got some fan translated materials for that, but it's kind of all over the place. But the point is that I maintain that the setting itself is fascinating enough that I want more of it. And a work that leaves you wanting more, I'd say is the highest compliment you can give a given game or work or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Some may say, isn't that just a glorified tease? No. If you're that invested that you want more of it, that is a win. So, because of that, I cannot give this any grade other than weeb.
All right. Well, from the monk, we have our first vote of weeb. Flutter! You weren't here earlier when I called upon you. It's your turn.
Yes, as was stated earlier, the characters are very well written. The voice cast is great. The audio identity is stellar. I like Monk as with Monk, I can't give this any higher than weeb.
All right. And so with Brother Flutter, we have 2 votes of weeb. As for myself, I am the Mecha Maestro of this monastery. Mecha is my lifeblood. If I cut my arm open, out would come tiny little robots, not blood. Tiny little robots that would eventually become huge. The integration of fantasy and giant robots seems to get a bad reputation a lot of the time. People only seem to be able to name a few good ones, I guess is the best way to put it. And I can see why there is an issue. Because a lot of people, when they think of mecha, they think of technology. Knights and Magic is a perfect example of how you can do fantasy mecha. A perfect example. The other one being Magic Knight Rayearth, but that's more Maho Shoujo than mecha. It's Maho Shoujo mecha. We'll get it. We'll say that.
Yes.
Especially since season 2 is way more mecha. As stated before, the integration of the CG, all of the CG is mecha or mecha-related things only. Everything else is normal drawings. And the interpolation, the way it's all overlaid and integrated with each other, is flawless. The sounds are impactful, and like I said, even if you've heard them elsewhere, the way they're used here are used in ways that fit the situation to a T. The characters work together. Not only are they flawed in many different ways, every character has their flaws, but their strengths help to shore up those flaws. It's a really nice ensemble cast that I think even someone like Riku Sanja would be proud of. Concerning Ernie himself, and this going into a little more detail about Gary Stu accusations. Oh, he invented all this stuff. Well, remember that he has all of the knowledge of 21st century Japan and the world, and of a high-level technological programmer. When he discovered that magic is basically just programming at its most fundamental level, all of his skills became immediately useful to anything magic. The fact that he knows so many things about robots because he was obsessed with robots means that designing a jet engine for robots, designing all these other things for robots so that they work better, it just fits. It's just part of what he's always done as part of his hobby. That's why he told the king it was his hobby. His original hobby was building plastic models and obsessing over giant robots. In a world where everything goes around giant robots and programming, a godly programmer who loves giant robots is going to look like a Gary Stu because the world fits his skill set. Which is part of the premise. If you're going to say, oh, because he was reincarnated into a world that perfectly fits his skill set, he's a Gary Stu, then I would argue that most isekai protags at that point, no matter who they are Gary Stews and Mary Stews.
Yeah, and
there are some that actually are, but that's beside the point.
Let's contrast this with say Jesus Kun. Even though Sword Art Online isn't an isekai, work with me on this.
Sword Art Online is isekai adjacent.
Yeah, a lot of he goes from just being a avid gamer to being a background engineer when it comes to the stuff that he pulls off throughout the first few seasons. Never mind him breaking established rules within a given setting, but that's another story. Whereas what you have with Eru is not far removed from the kind of setup that you had with John Carter. John Carter, when he gets transported to Mars, he's in a place that is rife with conflict. Carter, before he was spirited away to Mars, was a Confederate soldier. I believe he was a captain. And the main reason for his ridiculous strength and leaping ability, which is where Superman got it from, is the fact that Mars has lower gravity.
Yep. So because he was under Earth gravity the entire time, his muscles and skeletal structure are made for Earth gravity. Being on Mars, well, that's going to make him,
Yeah, so he's the originator of being able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
Yes. So the fact that, Kubata reincarnated into a world that suits his particular skill set could be seen as some sort of guiding force, but there's no evidence of such guiding force.
There's no
it could also just be seen,
goddess.
Yes, it could also just be seen as law of numbers. But the thing Ernie has here is those are the only strengths he really has. socially, he's quite inept. The only reason Addie and Kid became his friends was because he saved Addie from slipping and falling off a roof when he was a kid, and then taught them magic, and they just kind of get him from being around him for so long. The rest of the people around him who are his friends kind of just let him do his own thing, march to his own tune, but don't really understand him well. Batson and David, the two Knightsmiths he's always associated with, only understand him on the engineering level.
Mm-hmm.
Edgar, Dietrich, and Helvey only understand him on the Night Runner level. It is really only Kid and Addie that truly understand Ernie, and only because they've been with him so long. Otherwise, socially, he's terrible. And when it comes to anything outside of his chosen focuses, he just doesn't care. In many cases, he just shows disinterest.
Mm-hmm.
So there's very much a part of Ernie where you might be able to make an argument that he's a little too gifted, but he's got the setbacks. And Mario did point out, bro just has mechtism. Yes, absolutely, just has mechtism.
Yes.
But all the characters shore each other up, and that's important for a small ensemble like this one. And because of all of these things together, the fantastic art design, the fantastic characterization, everything that happens all together, there is no way I can give this anything less than weeb. And with that in mind, we have 3 votes of weeb and none of scrub, which means this parliament finds knights and magic to be weeb.
Oh yes, and what? And once again, I will rub it eternally in the face of Gigguk. Because that one little remark about Mecha being dead in the West will eternally be a eat crow moment. But it is that time once again, ladies and gentlemen, for us to spin the wheel and make the deal.
Wheel of morality, turn, turn, turn. Tell us the lesson that we must learn.
All right, and let's see what we are going to be doing next. So, question.
Yes.
Yes.
Have you guys prepared for Armageddon?
Imana Thusono Tokida.
Yes! Tune in a few weeks as we go over Get a Robo Armageddon.
Get up!
Yes.
And
I already have it on my computer, Monk. We don't have to do shit.
And no doubt have to go into the what the fuck happened midway through that particular series.
Uh-huh.
Not in a bad
That's
way, but
fine.
in a
Weird way.
Things get complicated when developing projects.
Yes, yes, Cure. Yes, yes. It is indeed time for the last days of this world.
Mm-hmm. So that is going to be a story for another week.
Indeed.
But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Why are they showing advertisements in our chats? Discord.
Oh yeah, Discord's been doing that whole quest thing for a while. I turn that off whenever it shows up.
Yeah.
It's either tied to games I already have or games I have no interest in getting.
That part.
'Cause you're not going to see me running a Minecraft server anytime soon. I'll put it that way.
Right.
But
How you doing after Parliament? You awake, sorta?
yeah, why would I not be?
I don't know. I don't know if that stuff wears you out.
Not really.
Well, that's
If-
good.
If anything, after doing a show, I've got an excess of energy.
Oh yeah, that can happen. Yeah, for sure.
You know, I see the same thing with stand-up comics I've talked to about how they usually end up going to some sort of after show or the like because they can't just go straight to bed. They're too wired up from
Oh
the
no,
show.
I totally get it. It's that way for me after GMing. I'm too hype afterwards. So are we doing this live or are we just recording?
Whenever I do, sometimes when I do these as recorded and not uploads, it takes like a day for the processing to finish, and sometimes it does it so in only 30 minutes, which is why I've been doing these things live more often.
Yeah. I'm good either way. Just let me know that I can share stuff.
All right, so
And you wanted to talk about the illustration design, right?
yeah, the idea with this was going into the illustration design from your perspective, you know, as an artist.
Awesome.
Load up the active. Since I'm gonna need to use that to get your put in some sort of avatar for your end.
Okay.